All right, folks, we're back. Welcome to HPP, the podcast that covers college basketball and the NBA draft inside now. I'm Rich Harris. Thank you for joining us again. Today, I'm joined by our two rocks, the guys who've been with us basically since the beginning, Drew Barton and Cam Reel. And what we're going to do is we didn't get a chance to talk before the Final Four, but we're going to give our final thoughts on the tournament, give out our season awards, talk about what's going on in the portal and all that good stuff. So let's just get on with the tournament. I know it's a little over a week since it ended, but, you know, the Final Four certainly had two surprise teams in there. It is my opinion that every year we see at least one team, and if you go back and look at the brackets, you will see that when when a George Mason, or when a Florida Gulf Coast, or this year, last year, FAU, this year, NC State and Alabama, if you look at the path, you know, the stars kind of aligned for those teams. And they didn't have to face the ultimate toughest road. So what I'm saying is they didn't have to run the gauntlet like Connecticut did, for example. You know, they had other teams beat the teams they should have played. And so I'm of the opinion, and of course I got a lot of feedback for saying this on Twitter to Alabama fans who still hassle me on a weekly basis. That basically Alabama and NC State had everything fall in place for them. I don't know what you guys think, but what'd you think? Drew?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of always the case, right? Like you always, like you said, Rich, you kind of see it. I mean, I will say this. I think Alabama, we know the computers love them all year. Personally, my biggest issue with them is their style of play to me is so hit or miss. It rides so hot and cold. Am I shocked based on like some of the talent they had that they were able to make a run? No, it's just, to me, the way that they were playing going into the tournament did inspire me with a bunch of confidence that they're going to be able to go on some deep Final Four run.
They played their worst basketball going into the tournament.
Exactly. You know, I mean, I have to tip the cap to Grant Nelson. I think the last time we all spoke, he was a player that we were all kind of coming into the tournament, most definitely. And if not, I think it was his first game in the tournament. We were all a little like, oh man, this is like, it was a transfer we thought was going to be a match made in heaven. Didn't really work and was starting to look almost like a negative now. But you have to tip the cap to him. I mean, the guy took off. I mean, he was one of the biggest, possibly the biggest riser over the last kind of final games of the tournament since we last spoke, which I think was going into the Sweet 16, if I'm not mistaken, or around that time.
Yeah, we were at the Sweet 16 last time.
And so, you know, I think we all think highly of Sears. He was my runner-up for Player of the Year in the SEC. I think he's a hell of a point guard. Their offensive style is just, it's so fast that when it clicks, they can run and score with anybody. I mean, we saw them give UConn probably their best game in the tournament through at least a good chunk of that game. So, you know, I think it's just the stars align, and that's what makes March so interesting is you get hot at the right time. And NC State, nobody wanted to play that team in the entire country probably. I mean, even Purdue probably had to have some sense of like, dude, this team is just on one right now. And, you know, while Purdue handled business pretty well, there's always that kind of magic of March factor, which we can talk about numbers. We can go into synergy, KenPom, eye test. We here watch more games than probably anybody that I know, at least. And still, all of a sudden, you know, Burns decides to just turn a corner and become an absolute monster and become an endearing player. So I think it's just the way it aligns. I think we had two teams that we all kind of expected to make there. I'll be honest, I thought Purdue might choke along the way, but no one's surprised they got there. Alabama, again, it's more shocking just because of the script being flipped so quickly from a team that was kind of floundering to a team that was a buzzsaw. And then NC State's almost kind of like you got to pencil a team like that in. I'll never do it in my bracket because I'm not brave enough, but you kind of just have to expect it, that there's always that, you know, 9 to 11 seed that just gets it going at the right time. So made for entertaining basketball, though.
Sure. What do you think, Cam?
Yeah, man, I thought this was a really just an all-around really enjoyable tournament. Like, I love seeing these sort of, not the college Cinderella stories, but they're definitely upset teams. You know, I thought about taking Bama in our matchup with North Carolina, but I just thought that North Carolina was going to be better at that style of play. And, we've seen them play that way throughout the year. Like North Carolina really generally thrived in like a fast-paced game, and Bama just got them. I mean, that's the beauty of March is, on any given night, you can get got, even if you're the better team. Yeah, there's NC State. I think that particular particular quarter of the bracket was just kind of a mess.
Yeah,
I mean,
starting
Houston
off with
was,
Kentucky losing, NC State
yeah,
was supposed to play Kentucky,
yeah,
and that was
and
supposed
who
to be
knows
the
what,
end of their story.
yeah, and two, I mean, like coming up against an injured Houston team that just wouldn't quit. Duke,
No,
well, they
that's how
played Duke, but
Duke
yeah,
moved on. Yeah,
but like just that quarter of the bracket in general is just such a mess. But also it's full of teams that got hot at the right time, and I kind of wonder too, like I've always kind of thought this about the tournament, but like how much does it really measure who the best team in the country is? I don't know if it does that very well.
no,
But it sure as hell is entertaining, and that's what
right.
it's here to do. And it was a really great tournament run, especially the stretch was really fun. Elite Eight was great.
No, one game and out, it never proves anything. To me, the NBA, when the playoffs are over, you pretty much feel very confident that the best team won. I think it's hard to get lucky when you have to win, the best of seven. It's just you can't.
Yeah,
That's impossible to do. Get lucky unless the other team all of a sudden loses, a couple of key players or something like that. But you're not going to. That's not going to happen all the way to the championship. You know what I'm saying? You're not going to have all your opponents suddenly lose all their players.
yeah. I
But
will say though, this year in particular, the best team won.
oh
I
yeah,
think this UConn team,
last year
yeah.
too. Yeah, no
This
one doubts that.
particular UConn team though has to be one of the best college basketball teams I've seen, maybe in my lifetime. They're
It's
incredible.
I'm going out and saying, and I think I texted this like after the game, like this is the best team in my lifetime I've ever seen. Not saying it has the most NBA talent, not saying it's the most, explosive or high most profile guys, but I'm like, to lose what they lost. I don't know if we'll ever I don't know if we're going to see a team again that lost the type of firepower and talent that they did and came back and were more dominant.
right.
I don't think, yeah.
When Florida did it, they had the same guys.
Yep.
Yeah,
Al Horford
essentially, yeah.
and Noah and all those guys.
Corey Brewer, yeah.
Corey Brewer. Yeah, Corey
Yeah.
Brewer.
And they all came back. This was a different group. It's
Yeah.
rather amazing. I think it's the best team I've seen since the Nova team, the Nova team that dominated the tournament. And it would be interesting to see that Nova team play either of these UConn teams. Take your pick. But this one was statistically more dominant, and probably better because I wasn't a big believer in Sonogo. I think Klingon's a lot better. I think this team is better. But yeah, and that UConn team would probably have it over Nova in the sense that Nova couldn't match Klingon. But then again, that Nova team had Brunson. So but maybe Tristan Newton is the next Brunson. Who knows? Well, one thing I wanted to say about North Carolina, we got to remember Alabama got to, they only beat North Carolina by 2. And I don't know if North Carolina, or at least RJ Davis, could have played any worse. 0 for 9 from 3. By the way, Caleb Love, we expected that UConn, Arizona, Caleb Love, RJ Davis matchup. Well, they both lost in the Sweet 16, so it never came to volition. But Caleb Love also went 0 for 9 from 3.
They were awful. I think they combined to go 1 for 18. I think Davis hit 1 3.
No, I think he was 0 for 9.
So they were over. I thought they were 1 for 18.
No, if you click on the link, you'll get the box score. But
Jeez.
Marquette too, when they played NC State, they couldn't throw it in the ocean. But what I wanted to say was the one thing, I've never been a big believer in Hubert Davis, and I really thought he kind of choked in that Alabama game. Elliot Cadeau only played 13 minutes. And what was the key play? What's the play if you were thinking as a North Carolina fan, the one play you're going to remember is Jalen Withers taking a 3-point shot.
Burped one up. He burped that up. That was probably the worst. You might argue that was the worst shot selection like in the tournament in terms of just like timing, and it was awful.
That's going to go down in NCAA history. You know, is like, what are you doing? I almost fell out of my chair. But you know, Cadeau, he benched Cadeau. Cadeau only played 13 minutes of that game, and he wasn't there down the stretch. You can't ride with a guy all season long and he's having a bad night, and all of a sudden you decide you're not going to play him, because they really didn't have any other options. So they had to play RJ Davis on the ball. He had been thriving all year off the ball. Okay, so now you're changing your whole offensive philosophy because Grant Nelson is suddenly out of his mind. You know, so I really thought Hubert Davis really blew it. Go with Cadeau, let RJ Davis play off the ball, let him shoot out of it, and he probably doesn't go 0 for 9. The other thing, that really shocked me, and I don't understand how this happens. We watched Alabama all year. They couldn't play a lick of defense. And in the tournament, all of a sudden they're in your jerseys. Where did that come from? I'm serious. I don't get that.
There's a part of me that kind of thinks that like Alabama, like now I look back at their season, is kind of like that AAU team or like that super stud high school team that kind of just like, yeah, we're bigger, we're badder, we got a higher profile than you, so we just kind of roll the balls out and just kind of hoop. And then they like kind of try to flip the switch, and because they have the athletes and the players, they can. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from the run they went on, because I mean they did look like a completely different team. They looked like the Bama team I think everyone thought they were going to look like at the start of the year.
Right, but where does this come from? Why weren't they doing it all year?
Defense, I think. Defense is a desire thing. Like I think at the end of the day, like you have to want to play defense. You can't coach somebody who wants to, because it's not really glamorous. It's not sexy. It's not necessarily even fun, because you have to work so hard at it. And so I think that they kind of operated with the motto of like, we're good enough to get there. When we get there, we'll like, like the meme of the guy leaning forward in his chair, like playing video games. Like we're going to like start trying now. I kind of think that's what happened. That's the only answer I can give, because that, like I said, I could not tell you if you showed me highlights from Alabama beating like UNC and giving UConn a game, 2 weeks into the future when they were in their conference tournament, I'd be like, get that, no way, photoshopped, fake news, not real. They just like from a competitive standpoint. So, yeah, I think it was just a moment where they realized. And I give Oach credit here, where I think he was able to galvanize the guys and like, look, like this is the NCAA tournament. Like if you don't play defense, you will go home, because you want to be the next Kentucky. Now, some of that's, yes, you have a guy who goes out of his mind and Golke going nuclear, but like that can be you if you don't lock in. And to their credit, they did.
Yeah. I also thought that the committee did a shit job of grouping these teams. For example, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I thought the best game of the tournament was Purdue and Tennessee. Anybody have
maybe the saddest?
No, but seriously, the most competitive, the most intense, the game you really wanted to watch.
Yes.
Can you think? I mean, I look forward to that game more than I did with the national championship, because I thought Connecticut was going to win the national championship, and I didn't have a lot of doubt.
Yeah, I agree.
So that was an Elite Eight game. That should not be happening in the Elite Eight. There were other games that were happening like in the Sweet 16. You were thinking this should be an Elite Eight game. There were so many games that seemed to be happening around too early. And so, I went and I seeded I don't know how the committee does this as well. So they actually seed the teams 1 through 68. So, and then they put them in groups of 4. I don't know how they did that, and I'm sure I could have looked it up, but I kind of did it in my own head, and we talked about this. So if you look at the chart I have here, on I have real distribution, and if you look of the groups of four, if you look at the top 5 seeds, the East had all number ones except for the second seed, which was a 2. And then if you look at the Midwest, they were all 2s and 1. Well, no, it went 2, 1, 2, 4, 3. But then you go to the South, it was 4, 4, 4, 2, 2. And if you go to the West, it was 3, 3, 3, 3, 4. So we knew this just by looking at the bracket, we knew the South and the West were the weakest, and we knew the East was the strongest, and the Midwest was right behind. We could see that with our own eyes. And so I asked Mike DeCourcy, who's the bracketologist for Fox. I asked him, I said, what the hell's going on here? Do they do it like you would do a fantasy draft where Drew picks first and then I go second, Cam goes third, and then Cam starts first the next round, serpentine or a snake draft, some people call it. And he said, no. I wrote the quote down. He said, no, it's almost entirely based on geography. So, but here's what I still don't get. If that's the case, then why the hell did Tennessee get put in the Midwest with Purdue? Shouldn't Tennessee been in the South?
I understand, do I think that UConn, being able to play out in Boston, have sure, there's that, but I don't know. If I asked a coach personally, would you rather play talent level where you're would you rather be rewarded versus the talent you have to play or the place you play? I think every single coach is I'd rather play the teams that are properly seeded. I'd rather play the teams, the easier route on competition than play a couple 100 miles closer to home, or, I don't know. That's how I'd feel like.
But what he's saying is so they put, they put the top 4 teams, in the regions, and they all make geographic sense. But then to me, the 5th best team was Tennessee. Okay.
Yeah,
of the 2 seats was it. So why the hell did they put them with Purdue? Because Purdue.
I see what you're saying. Why did they
should have been with who was the worst 1 seed? North Carolina. Tennessee should have been versus North Carolina in the South.
Yes. I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay, that doesn't.
And if you do that, you don't have Purdue playing Tennessee in the Elite 8. You have Tennessee playing Purdue in the Final 4.
I see what you're saying.
And what I'm saying is, if you're the worst in your group, if you're the worst in your foot, why should you be rewarded? Why should you be given? I suppose the committee's answer would be, well, distinguishing between the best 2 seed and the worst 2 seed is not much of a difference. I think that's what their reply would be.
I see what you're saying. I thought you were just talking about in general, would you the geography of it all, but. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Tennessee, I think some of it too is just there was a lot of parity in college basketball this year, and I think that probably made their job pretty difficult because outside of UConn, I think there were moments where so many teams look like the 2nd best team in the country for stretches this year, or kind of in that range. So this was a year where I think seeding was pretty difficult. To be honest, outside of UConn.
But we all said, every one of us, before the tournament started, the East is unbelievable. So why would you do that? Why would you do that to the best team in the country? Why would you do that disservice to UConn?
Yeah.
Why would you plug just because those teams don't deserve to be? The only teams that deserve to be rewarded based on geography, to me, is the number 1 seeds.
Sure.
And
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that they're just. Also, I could see them banking on computers a lot in that process. If they just went on computers in terms of who they thought the best teams were, I don't really know what their process would be. And I've always kind of thought the seeding was a little bit weird in that sense, because I feel like every year we always have a conversation about a handful of teams that kind of just got screwed. And you're like, why is this? I think this year was one of the most notable that I can remember, in which there was one quadrant that we were like, dude, there's 4, was it 4 Power 6 champions in one conference? Or in one quadrant, was it this year?
Yeah, I think that was the East.
It was the East. It was Iowa State, Illinois,
FAU,
FAU, and UConn.
San Diego State.
Then so that I think like that's, but I also don't know. I'm assuming that they went heavy on computers this year, maybe, and computers are always,
Yeah, they
gonna have
rewarded.
their
They put San Diego State in the East based on geography.
yeah.
It just makes no sense to me. To me, the major focus should be that, just like a fantasy draft, you go up the list and then you go down the list. You go up and then you go down to try to get balance, to try to not have one region loaded and try to make sure the best teams get in the Final Four. And I think they did a really shit job of doing that. And of course, he's saying they did it because of geography, but that doesn't make sense to me either, because San Diego State's not in the East. So I don't get it.
Is there a cutoff though? Like maybe there's a cutoff, like we reward geography up to a certain seed. Maybe
He didn't say that.
I'm just like spitballing here because like that happened last year with St. Mary's. They were a 5 seed last year and had to go play in New York. They were in Albany.
Right.
So I'm just curious if there's like a cutoff, like they reward geography through 2 seeds. I don't know. The process honestly has never really made a lot of sense to me in terms of placing the teams. I get how they pick the field, but like actually placing them, like outside of the 1 seeds, like you said, going 1, 2, 3, 4 regionality and ranking them, that to me makes sense. But after that, I feel like it's kind of a crapshoot.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So continuing on, Seton Hall, one of the 3 teams to beat UConn this season, nipped Indiana State in the NIT. And by the way, Indiana State, I don't know if you guys know this, was the highest team in the history of the NCAA tournament to have the highest net ranking, which was something like 25, to be left out of the NCAA tournament.
I think it was 29.
Yeah. Okay.
It was 29.
And arguably, those 2 teams, we wanted to see Indiana State in the tournament. You could have made a really good argument for Seton Hall. I also think you could have made a very good argument for Pitt and St. John's. Those are the 4 teams to me that were left out that should have been in. Given that the NIT seems to be becoming an afterthought, I think we've talked about this before. And do we see any problem with expanding the tournament by, adding 4 teams or maybe 8? I don't really want to see 8, but I think 4 would do it.
I feel like the way to do it would be, to add an extra play in. I think the first 4 is kind of like a nice little appetizer to, just kind of get you in the mood for March Madness before all of the games really kick in the next day. And also, I just think it fits for these bubble teams where it's like, I think all of them maybe deserve to be in, but I want to see which team's the hottest. I think that kind of is fitting. I just couldn't imagine what March Madness would look like without those automatic bids, because a lot of times, talk about NC State. That's how some of these truly great March Madness runs start, is on a tournament run in conference play.
Right.
So I think, I'm open to seeing more teams, but let's do it in a way that doesn't, completely kind of tear down the history of March Madness.
Well, you bring that up, and there is a movement now headed by Greg Sankey, who's the commissioner of the SEC, and also Tom Izzo has given it his thumbs up. They want to eliminate the automatic bids. I can't even imagine that.
It's the biggest crock ever.
That is, and what they're saying is, well, maybe we could do it like football, where they have Division 1 and Division 1A. Well, they don't really call it that anymore, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, get that. My one response to good old Sankey has been, tell that to Oakland and tell that to Yale.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're mighty.
Well, tell that to FAU the season before. If they don't have the automatic bids, does FAU even get in the tournament last year?
No,
NC State wouldn't have got in this year.
No, for sure. No, I just think like you say that, and it's just fitting. It's like poetic justice to have Kentucky, who we all were probably, well, I know a lot of us were pretty high on, and
I think everyone on the show picked them to be part of their Final Four.
Yeah, I know I did. And I thought Auburn was a sneaky dark horse team. They were in that bracket also with UConn. I was like a sneaky dark horse team to maybe be able to do some damage. And they both got bumped by Yale and by Oakland. So you can say what you want. And it's like, if you're going to argue for that, then we should just make it like an end. If you're, because their point is we need the best teams in, which, okay, fine. On any given day, Auburn probably beats Yale 8 times out of 10 if they play. You know, if you want to feel confident, Oakland probably, that might be the one game out of 10 that Oakland beats Kentucky.
Yeah, for sure. I think I think Yale might win maybe 3 out of 10. But
sure. But like, then it's like, then why don't we just do away with this and go the NBA route and just have a best of 7 series for the top 16 teams in the country, and then just have that be it. That way, the true best teams are going to duke it out, you know, and we'll have a more concise, the best team won.
Don't give them any ideas, because I think that's where they want to go.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. Like that, we might as well just do that because
it'd be fun, but it's not March Madness.
Exactly. I mean, I would have loved to see UConn and Tennessee play 7 times on a neutral court, or even if they did a home and away, whatever they did. But like Cam said, then it's not March Madness. It's just NBA playoffs with 18-year-olds tossed in there. Like,
to me, that's the beauty of all this.
100%.
It's exactly the beauty when Princeton faces an unbeatable Georgetown, you know, with Patrick Ewing, and they beat them, you know, and when Villanova wins the national title, you know, with a team that barely made the tournament. You know, again, against Patrick Ewing. I'm not picking on Patrick Ewing. You know, when NC State beats Houston and Hakeem Olajuwon, but I go deeper than that. You know, it's just like you said, it's like Oakland this year, FAU last year. You know, you would eliminate all these teams. What a shame that would be. And that is just not what March Madness is about. It's about David versus Goliath. That's what makes it amazing.
Well, and I also think there's something to be said about there being a level of almost even truer difficulty and even more of an appreciation for what teams like what UConn just did, knowing it's a 1-game elimination. That one slip up, one missed coverage, one guy having it going crazy costs you a game. It's easier over the course and just the law of averages to play a 7-game series, even a 3-game series, and go, okay, the better team's probably going to win. But it's almost more difficult to do what these teams are doing because UConn had to win, was it, how many, 16 straight tournament games or whatever it is, or, you know, whatever the number is, to get to do what they did, and couldn't mess up one time. That's a hell of a lot more impressive than, you know, in my opinion, than, okay, going through the traditional, I'm a 1 playing an 8, and then I play a 5 and I get 7 games where I can afford a bad game. You can't afford a bad game. You cannot afford, you have to be perfect.
Right.
So.
And then when they do it in convincing fashion, there is no doubt in your mind. There's no doubt in your mind that they're the best team.
Absolutely. Literally football in his ear, like, no, go get more money. Go make all the money. Go have your shitty, like, you know, 8th best SEC team so they can sneak in there and go get their shit kicked in by UConn, but you go make an extra 80 grand from it. That's exactly what that was.
Yeah. These guys have guys like Sankey, and I was shocked when Izzo said he was all for it. I really was, but guys like Sankey just have no respect for the game. I mean, think about, you know, when we think about basketball, and if you like could like encapsulate, you know, like the images that float through your mind, probably every one of us who love basketball like we do, one of the things that probably pops into our mind is the movie Hoosiers. You're taking that element out of the tournament if you do what he suggests.
Completely.
Yeah. And so Greg Sankey could go fuck himself, and I'll say that right on record. Speaking of which, I won't be swearing like that when Coach James Jones of Yale comes on the show, but I will be discussing that topic. Hopefully he will say the same, but I won't say it because he's a Yale coach. So all right. So, you know, I had a thought. As you can see, you guys know I haven't been feeling well, and I got to have surgery in a couple of weeks. So I've been and I haven't had a chance to talk to you guys. So I've been like stewing on certain things, and then I have Alabama people in my ear every day. It's like, go get a job or something, will you? But one thing I was thinking about rule changes, and I'm going to give you. I kid you not. I probably have watched over 500 basketball games this year. And I don't remember one where they didn't use this phrase. This game is really physical. Did you hear that? Like every game, this game is really physical. Yeah, you're damn right it's physical there. It's almost tackle football out there. And so it's just the opposite of the NBA, where interestingly enough, I forget who it was, a European prospect, I think, who was drafted and is yet to come over, or maybe he did come over, but he went back to Europe, and they asked him recently if he was going to come back to the NBA. He said, nah, I'm not really interested in the NBA. The NBA is just a show. And which goes back to our Harlem Globetrotters conversation. I would like to see a happy medium between the NBA and college, okay? Where college is tackle football, and the NBA is just, defense is purely optional and maybe even frowned upon. What are your guys' thoughts? And are there any other rule changes you would like to see in college? We'll talk about NBA soon.
So I love the level of physicality in college ball, and I don't want it to go anywhere. To me, that's a big part of why, we're having this conversation about how upsets happen. That's a big part of it, is that, when you're kind of an underdog team, you might be able to get away with a few things that, the blue bloods might not be able to in terms of defensively. That's something that I noticed in some of the games from this year, especially. The thing that I would really like to see change in college ball is I wish they would go to 6 fouls.
Bingo, Cam. I was literally that was what I was going to say.
I love
Great call, Cam.
There's nothing I hate more than watching a great physical college game, and then, the key defensive player or key star for the team that's in the lead goes out because they have 5 fouls, or they have 4. Which is, you're basically completely handcuffed at 4. And, anybody that's played, even high school level basketball knows, you can rack up those fouls pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
And it's only getting faster with, the level of scrutiny that I think referees have now. I think they're more likely to call everything rather than kind of let players play. So I just, there were a few games this year, not excluding the Purdue-Tennessee game, that were basically basically runs to the free throw line and back down to play defense. I think that's fine. If it's a physical game, you want to call all the fouls, that's great, but don't take players out of the game in order to call those fouls.
I think foul shooting contests ruin the game. And
they suck.
Yeah, they do. But that's why I would like to see, I don't want to take all the physicality out of the game. It's just like the jersey holds and the, I don't know, the hockey-like checks.
I do think the 6th foul would help, though, to a degree.
No, I love the 6th foul.
That's where I was going to go. And I think, Cam's right. There's no worse feeling than than seeing a guy have to go sit on the bench with 9 minutes left in a close game, because some coaches will pull a guy with 3 because they're so worried of his style of play. If you're a big man in particular, 3 fouls is like having 4.
Oh my God! If you get two, most coaches will sit you down for the rest of the half.
So I think that would help. Maybe let guys. I don't know. I think that's the big one. I'm with Cam. I love the physicality. I think arguably, in my opinion, one of the most compelling games to me was that A&M and Houston game. That was fun. That might have been the ugliest basketball
No,
You
no,
go
no.
like,
Grand Canyon and Alabama was the other.
that was the second one that was going to come to mind. Like those two games though were super compelling to me. Like I just was like glued to my TV. Obviously, I had a little bit of more investment with Grand Canyon. Shout out to them for knocking off my rival Gales, and also we had Grant Foster on the show, so we got to root for him. And his story is awesome. But away from that, I love the physicality. I'm totally with Cam. I think 6 fouls kind of helps with that. It allows guys to stay aggressive. It gives refs a little more wiggle room to maybe have a bad whistle. We've saw a couple of them. That's the foul. Like you're gonna call that, and now a guy's got 3 or now he's got 4, and you're like, man, he has 4, and even if you earn that 4th one, he has 4 because that second one was super cheeky and was kind of like, So I'm with Cam. Give 6 fouls, and I think solves a lot of my problems.
I was watching a European basketball game on TV yesterday or the day before. And I could not believe, we always have said, on this show, and I've always thought European basketball is much more physical than the NBA. And that's true. And I always said it was much more physical than college basketball. No, not anymore. Not anymore. I mean, I'm watching the German top level German league. It was a top team in the German league. And they were blowing out somebody. But the bottom line is it's not as physical as college basketball. It's not.
No, it's not. Just on that note too, Rich, because we were talking about where the happy medium is. Like, hey,
well, I think Europe's the happy medium.
Yeah, I think they do. And I think the major difference between European ball and the NBA is they don't have a defense of 3 seconds in Europe.
Right. And I want that in the NBA.
And I think the defense of 3 seconds just needs to go away.
No. Right. Exactly.
I just think and like the basis for it, I think, is so kind of silly. Like in this idea that it speeds up the game, it really just removes rim protectors from playing. Like the game's getting smaller in the NBA, but
and they also have to call the game differently in the charge zone, where you can't take the charge, the restricted area. Because how many times now do you see a guy's coming toward the rim, and the big man actually jumps out of the way in big games? I saw PJ Hall do it a couple times when they lost to Alabama. He actually jumped out of the way to avoid getting a blocking call in the restricted area and didn't challenge the shot. I know why he did it. He didn't want to foul out. He did foul out, but he didn't want to get a cheap call in the restricted area. I think and now the rule is, but they never call it this way. The rule is if you're in the air and you go straight up, there is no foul. There is
you have a vertical cylinder. You have a vertical cylinder.
Yeah, so there's no offensive foul. There's no defensive foul. Yeah. And if you two collide, but you know what happens? They call it on the defensive guy anyway.
Every time. Yeah. It's probably my biggest frustration is people think like you have as a defender, you have a vertical cylinder that you are allowed to contest in. In fact, if you don't leave your feet in the restricted zone,
right, it's a charge. It's a block.
A block. So you're basically saying if you don't leave, we can technically get you with a block, and if you do leave, we're going to get you with one anyways, or we're going to get you with a foul. Yeah. So what is the defender supposed to do
you go back and watch games, you'll see guys, especially if they're foul prone or if they're in foul trouble in that particular, you'll see them jump out of the restricted area and just let the layup go by. It's crazy. That's not what basketball is supposed to be about. You're not supposed to jump out of the way. Well, in the NBA you do, but that's a different story. All right. So we'll move on to the coaching carousel and the biggest moves. And, it's the backdrop of this whole thing is what it's got me curious. And maybe something being out west. But Eric Musselman takes over at USC, and then Calipari, who's been in a power struggle with the AD at Kentucky, leaves for Arkansas. And a lot of Kentucky fans are probably, the way he's been in the tournament lately, no success for 5 years. We're probably ready to see him go. My question is, what keyed this was Southern Cal's coach, and I'm drawing a blank.
You're the Florida Gulf Coast guy, right?
Yes, Andy Enfield. So
yeah.
So what has me curious is now we talked earlier in the year about maybe it's time for Andy Enfield to leave USC. And now every story I've seen has made it sound like Andy Enfield went to SMU on his own. And I'm telling you now, nobody leaves USC to go to SMU voluntarily. Voluntarily. Have you heard anything about this? Anybody other than he supposedly left voluntarily to go to SMU?
I haven't. I mean,
Okay.
I know we talked about it. I'm not surprised that they moved off because I think USC had,
But apparently he did it on his own, because that's what started the dominoes to fall.
yeah. I mean, I don't know about that.
mean-
USC is one of the brands out west that does have the resources that can
And
kind
they're
of,
moving to the Big Ten.
yeah, like
I mean-
SEC athletic money is obviously a kind of a different breed, but like USC is one of the West Coast places that can kind of be in that, like they're in that stratosphere. It's not like a major gap. So, I mean, I wouldn't be leaving USC I mean, personally, maybe that's my West Coast showing, but
No, trust me, you wouldn't. So, what do you guys think about Calipari going to Arkansas, Musselman going to USC, Enfield going to SMU? Any thoughts there?
I mean, it's fun to see the coaching carousel become literal.
What?
Like maybe SMU's coach should have gotten the Kentucky job. I don't know. Like,
He
would've just
did a pretty
completed
nice.
it for
He
us.
did a pretty nice job actually this year. They were terrible last year. And in the season preview, I went out on a limb and I said SMU has a chance to win this conference. They didn't win the conference, but they came pretty close. They played good basketball this year. He didn't deserve to be fired. I don't know if he's got the job or not, but he's going to get a job. But I guess the weirdest part was Mark Pope going to Kentucky. But I don't know if they. I mean, what do you? Am I the only person who was surprised by this?
I think I'm surprised more that Kentucky couldn't get a bigger fish.
Right.
That's the thing. Like they do I think Mark, I mean, we're not that far removed from Mark Pope finishing, I think it was 5th in the WCC. Like now, yes, like his team definitely, I mean, this year they were kind of a pleasant surprise for BYU. They were better than I think. I thought they definitely overachieved.
Right.
I thought this year, underachieved in March still, but regardless. I mean, I think it's kind of the perfect stopgap hire where like he played there, obviously. He's passionate about Kentucky. He's the type of guy that I think can rally enough fan support because he's an alum and do a good enough job where they're not going to completely fall off of relevant. I mean, it's Kentucky. Like they're still going to be able to get some names in there. He is a good. I don't think Mark Pope's a bad coach. I think he's
I think BYU was really fun to watch this year offensively.
Which I think Kentucky fans are totally going to jump on that bandwagon when they see that kind of 3-point shooting, and if he's able,
ball
he's
movement.
Not going to be exactly. He's not going to have the caliber player that Calipari can bring in. I mean, you already saw all these guys are decommitting. Wagner just put his name in the portal. Big Z's going to Arkansas, but he's still going to be able to get high level talent there with his system. But I think this is kind of almost a win-win stopgap where if he's bad or like underachieves, you can kind of be like, well, it's Mark Pope. It wasn't who we wanted. We're kind of just biding time until the next big name pops up. And if he hits, you kind of have the built-in narrative of he's a Kentucky guy. He's back. Look how smart we look. We found Mark Pope. We got him kind of on the low, probably compared to what you would have had to probably play like a Dan Hurley, who they were trying to poach. So we'll see. I don't know. I think is it the best guy they could get? It sounds like situationally, compared like once all the top guys were out, when Hurley was out, Calipari was leaving. I know they're looking at Scott Drew, and he said no. I think Mark Pope is a general win. Like it could have gone a lot worse. Like Mark Pope is still a solid coach.
I was thinking guys like Brad Brunell of Clemson, and I'm drawing a blank on Illinois' coach
Underwood.
Brad Underwood, guys like I was thinking guys like that. But the real guys I was thinking were all in the Big East.
Yes, me too.
First came to mind was Patino, and I'm thinking, well, he is pretty old, but still he can hold the fort down for a few years and maybe have an underling like his son, who's his son's doing well.
No, doing well for sure.
And the other thing I was thinking was Sean Miller. To me, Sean Miller was the perfect fit.
That's a good one.
And then Shaka Smart would have probably been my next choice.
Yeah.
And I also thought about Greg McDermott of Creighton. Now, I think he's probably on the same level of Pope, but he certainly has a better resume
Oh,
than Pope.
100%.
No, I like
Yeah.
Devries too. Yeah. I feel like, the big thing is here, I think they're, as much as anything, like I know Cal left, but it's no secret that, they would have liked to have fired him or moved on from him.
Well, the AD wanted to.
Yeah.
For sure.
But I think, you said 5 years for Kentucky's, most recent success, but I mean, really, you got to go back to when Anthony Davis was there.
That's true.
I mean, if you're talking on like Kentucky's scale of success, yeah.
But I would say for the last 5 years, I don't think they've gotten out of the first round.
No.
They haven't got out the first weekend.
Oh, okay.
I think
but got out around a 32.
For Kentucky, that's unacceptable. Like that's sacrilegious.
Yeah, but so my thought is like, hey, maybe, we all know like Cal's number one thing is recruiting. You can go back, really through most of his career, and there's a lot of maybe, issues with his X's and O's. But like, maybe in the era of NIL, that recruiting skill isn't as valuable now. And, it's still Kentucky.
No, I don't think it is. Roster construction is.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, we're paying Cal all this money and his teams aren't all that good, even though we have all the best, prospects we can get our hands on. Maybe we need to invest in somebody that's more of a, a program facilitator who's going to, build up, a team and use, the brand weight of Kentucky and our NIL capabilities to do the recruiting for us.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Duke post Coach K. It's like you would expect Duke to completely fall off, without Coach K, but it's still Duke.
Yeah.
They still have the recruiting pool.
I think Cam brings up a good point with Pope. I think Pope's offense can be supercharging Kentucky because he's just being at Kentucky, he's going to be able to get a step tier higher of player in there, whether it's in the portal, whether it's a recruit, because it's Kentucky. Like you're still going to be able to get a step tier higher than a guy you're going to get at BYU. And so if you can kind of combine his offensive philosophy that is fun, it's fast, it can hit it really, it's kind of more of a modern NBA almost kind of vibe to it.
Yeah, five out at times. Yeah.
And you can get guys that are, just a tier above off of the brand name and with the NIL advantage. I wouldn't be shocked if it's not going to be instantaneous, because I think like the initial reaction across college, the landscape is, oh my God, what a downgrade. Oh my God. And I think that's going to get into the ears of kids who are like, oh, Calipari's not there anymore, especially those kids that have that like instant NBA ambition, but they're going to still be relevant. And I think Pope's X's and O's will translate well with a higher caliber of player. Because, BYU's solid players, but they're, to a degree limited athletically, and it's BYU in and of itself is probably a tough place to get guys to come play at and sell and pitch. Yeah. So I think Cam brings a good point where in the era where we're seeing that like the 5-star freshman only can get you so far, if he can come bring in veteran guys to buy into a system, utilize NIL there. We know he's passionate about being at Kentucky. It might take a couple years, but I wouldn't be shocked if this works out better than people, realize. I'm not promising a championship, but I mean, Cal didn't give you one for 12. It's been 12 years since you've had one. So
right. With undoubtedly, top 5 talent every year. All right. Are there any other coaching moves that kind of raised your eyebrows, or you were like, hey, it's about time? Or, a lot of the coaches that we've been talking about that should be fired got fired. I think just about everyone that we mentioned, got the axe. But is there any coaching moves you're really excited about or really shocked about?
Personally, Stanford, obviously, Haas being gone, I think, I think that's going to be a pretty interesting place. Can you win there? I think is the new in this era of NIL, the way that they recruit. That question was raised about football when I was working there. People are going to ask about women's basketball, Tara stepping down. So now it's like, I think the question is, can you actually win at Stanford in these big sports, the basketballs and the footballs with their academic restrictions and kind of seemingly they're kind of dipping their toe in NIL, but they're not going all in the way, like an SEC school is or a Big Ten school is. That's going to just be really interesting to see if Smith can get it going there. I think it's funny that I was having this conversation with a couple of the staff over at Menlo about Sprinkle going to Washington.
Right.
I think that'll be interesting, particularly because that deal was probably done 2 weeks before given how quickly it was announced. Like he knew before they lost to Purdue, he was already like, so what's my new backyard gonna look like? Where am I gonna put that painting? Like, come on, like we all kind of know. Like that was probably kind of a done deal, especially because of what was the name of the coach, the guy from Syracuse that they got rid of before.
I forget.
Yeah, but he had already left. So
Mike. Go ahead.
But yeah, like he had left, so the vacancy was open. So they
he
probably
was
reached out to
fired.
Sprinkle.
He was fired during the Pac-12 tournament.
Exactly. So they probably during the Pac-12 tournament hit Sprinkle up and were like, "Hey, look, we got a spot. You're our guy. We want you. We're going to be a Big Ten school soon." So I think that'll be an interesting one because I think he did an awesome job with Utah State, given how much they lost, and he kind of did like almost like a mini UConn kind of vibe where like they lost. I think was it their whole starting five that they lost, or like all their top five scorers or something. I forget what it was, and to be really competitive in the Mountain West, win a game in the tournament.
It was Sprinkle.
Yeah,
they lost their their top 12 or 13 players.
Yeah, I'm just talking about like you lose your starting five.
Mike Hopkins it was Washington.
Hopkins. So I think those like just out my way, those two will be really interesting to see if A, can Stanford actually be fixed, and B, how does Sprinkle do jumping up to the big leagues, especially because like I said, that deal was probably done well before he lost his last game of the year.
By the way, do you realize Utah State has now had 3 consecutive one-year coaches? They can't keep a coach. It's a great place to get a new job.
Which also does kind of suck because they've been relatively successful too.
Yeah,
so it's not like they suck and it's just
no. That's why these coaches are getting jobs.
Exactly.
Any thoughts on any of these other coaching changes, Cam?
I'm excited for DeVries at West Virginia.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Solid coach. I think I like West Virginia and March Madness. It's always been one of the teams that I pull for. And, it looked like they were going to have to walk in the desert for a while, but I think they got a really good coach. So it'll be fun to see them come back on the scene in a year or two.
It'd also be interesting to see his son, who came with him, Tucker DeVries, see how he can play at the next level of play, going from the Missouri Valley to the Big 12. And that leads us into our next segue, is the portal activity. It's funny. I was doing this today, and I was, going through the updates, and I put all these charts in our script. And when I got done, there were about 5 or 6 guys that either entered the portal. I mean, significant guys that either entered the portal or actually finally committed to some team, and I had to do them all over again. So there's nearly 1,700 players in the portal now, and they have until May 1. So this could go on for quite some time. So I have the best of the best listed out here, and obviously I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll just read off our top 10 that are in the portal. What do you got?
Literally, as of 2 minutes ago, just because we're on the portal, Kobe Brea just jumped in.
Kobe Brea, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's big. We had Kobe Brea on the show. All right, so he wouldn't make our top 10, but he probably would make our top 20.
20 for sure.
Yeah. So here they go. Number 1 right now, we have Dylan Mitchell of Texas, who went in today. Number 2, we have DJ Wagner of Kentucky, who just went in today. John Al Davis of Florida Atlantic. Rylan Griffin of Alabama. Baba Miller, Florida State. Cliff Amore from Rutgers. AJ Storr, Wisconsin. Garway Duwall, Providence. Mark Mitchell of Duke. And number 10, we have Adu Thiero of Kentucky. Now, going down this list, you guys have any comments about the portal and who's entered it? You surprised any of these guys are coming in? I will tell you one trend that I'm obviously seeing, and this happened with Texas today, because Texas also had Tyrese Hunter, their point guard, shared point guard duties with Max Asmith. He entered today. And what was interesting was early in the day, Texas got a couple of commits from Indiana State players. One was a point guard, Julian Larry. The other one was a small forward. I think it's Jalen Kent. And so what happens? Texas's small forward decides to leave. Texas's point guard decides to leave. You see this all the time. Transfers come in, these guys say, oh shit, this guy's going to cut into my playing time. I'm out of here. And it happens every day. But you have any other comments about what's going on in the portal?
I simultaneously enjoy it, kind of like, and I almost feel guilty saying that because it keeps college basketball kind of at the forefront. There's almost kind of an excitement when I see like a big name jump in and you see like the list of schools I've contacted and you see your team on there. So I mean, I'm sure Cam has felt this way. If you see a guy that you really like and you see like Tennessee has contacted, you're like, oh, I can already see the jersey swap in my head. But then there's like the practical side of me that's like, man, this is so tough. Like, the reality of it is, like, obviously these top guys are going to find homes because they're too good not to. Like, coaches will make, you're going to find a spot. But you just go on the list, and I think the bigger argument, and this is like an entire podcast, you can almost do literally an entire podcast show on like the politics of college basketball or college athletics and this being part of it. It's just like so many guys are going to get left out to pasture because there's so many guys entering. There's not enough spots. And it's like, in the past, you weren't having guys like a Dylan Mitchell or an AJ Storr who were highly productive on good teams. I mean, I know, and having them jump in the portal, like they were either going to go to the draft or they were going to be the heir apparent and take the next step, stick 4 years and become the next Longhorns legend or Badger, whatever it was. And now now you have guys that are like all conference guys jumping in after 2 really successful years. They go to the tournament, maybe get to the Sweet 16. Now they're like, yeah, I'm out. That's like unheard of. And that's where like you're just getting this kind of toxic culture. I mean, a guy that I think
Griffin just went to the Final Four, and just about everybody in that squad could come back. He's gone.
I scouted Rylan Griffin
Alabama
in high school, and like I think he's a guy that's going to be whatever. I'm sure money's a part of it. I'm sure people are in his ear telling him, "You're the guy." He's in the perfect system. If you look, so much of his offense is generated off of just the flow of that system. How they find him in open situations, they get him open, they run him off screens. He's not, in my opinion, his game to me is not, let me go be the guy, go be the primary ball handler of my own shocker. He's like an elite off-ball threat. I scouted him in high school. He was an elite off-ball threat in high school. And like you have a system that plays to your strengths, that you were starting in, getting major minutes in, you're getting shots in, and you're leaving, and you're at Alabama. Like, if it's not good enough to be a starting small forward or shooting guard at Alabama, average double digits a game and go to the Final Four, what are you looking for? AJ Storr is, in my opinion, the poster child for everything that's wrong with this system. I don't know if you guys heard. Apparently, it was reported that Kansas was his number one place. Kansas reached out and said, hey, we'd love for you to come. He goes, I want $1 million in NIL. They said 750,000, take it or leave it, and he left.
Are you kidding me?
That's what I heard. I forget who reported it. This was a while ago. It was early on in this portal because at the time when he first jumped in, he was, I think, the number one guy before a lot of these other guys jumped in.
Probably for a while. Yeah.
And so, I'd have to go back and look. But like I hear these stories. I'm hearing, like Joshua. Why is Joshua Jefferson in the portal from St. Mary's? Really solid player. Really unfortunate injury timing, but was one of the best players in WCC. Would have been a first-team WCC guy if he stayed. His team makes the tournament. He wins the conference tournament.
He was headed toward all conference.
And that, yeah, he was. And I still said that he should have been off of just as a basketball guy. I was like, I couldn't in my right mind leave him off. I thought he was that impactful and valuable for that team. And why is he in the portal? Like, there's just so many guys that are like, this was designed to give people an out for a coaching change or a really bad situation. But I'm looking at guys and I'm like, okay, John L. Davis is in. I get it. Dusty's gone. Would any of us be shocked if he ended up at Michigan? Probably not.
I just can't believe anybody would give AJ Storr $750,000.
Yeah. But AJ Storr is also like the poster child for transfer.
He's a borderline second round pick.
But like that he's apparently had a lot of he apparently transferred high schools like 3 times or something like that. Like this is in his blood. This is in his blood. If I remember correctly, I was doing some homework in it because I was like, if Bill Self called me as a parent and said, I want your kid to come play for me for $750,000, I'd be like, you can have my entire family, whatever you want. Like, you can have them all. Anyways, I just think
like
that
the Plumleys.
Yeah, I don't mean to soapbox this, but like as somebody who like studied this in grad school is, living it to a degree. Now that we're going D2, we live in the portal for guys, kickbacks. You just see so many situations where like, why are these guys leaving such a good thing? DJ Wagner, okay, your coach left. John L. Davis, okay, your coach left. But then you look at like a Rylan Griffin, you look at like an AJ Storr, you look at a Dylan Mitchell, and I'm just like, Really?
Well,
You know,
getting back to my theory about, Dylan Mitchell and Tyrese Hunter leaving because two guys who play the same position just came in. There's no way that the guys for Indiana State are going to start over these guys.
exactly. If anything,
So
you should be like
I don't.
reinforcements, man. We're loading
So
up.
don't the coaches like sit down with their current players and say, hey, we're going to bring in certain guys, but don't worry, you're our starters, you're our stars. Isn't that? Or do they get pissed off that maybe those guys are getting as much money as them?
We had
It must be
those were issues.
money.
There was
It must
issues
be
with that at
money.
Miami when Nigel Pack first went to Miami. There were issues out with Isaiah Wong and Nigel Pack. Not personal, just Wong got a good sized bag to come there apparently, and Wong was like, "I just took us to an Elite Eight the year before. Where's my money?" And they got it figured out. But I do think money is a factor. I do think there's almost kind of this weird. We kind of joke with a guy like Musselman. It's like every time a guy goes in the portal, it's Arkansas is on his contact list. I think
Oh
there's
yeah.
almost some coaches. I think it's so gung ho that they're like recruiting they're like everybody, and it's like okay, you cannot bring in everyone.
Musselman and Oates. Anytime somebody's in the portal, they're on it.
And that probably rubs guys the wrong way.
And you know what? It totally backfired on Musselman this year.
Yeah,
he had a bunch of mediocre guys and no leaders.
Yeah. So I think there's so many factors, and I think this is going to be an issue for a while until there's either more regulation or until kind of the craze and the fact like kind of like the NIL craze kind of settles itself. I think there's so much money out there right now that's not really being regulated because there's no real regulation that guys are trying to take advantage and chase that bag while they can. Because I'm sure down the line there will be limits on. They'll probably tighten up the having to sit out rules. COVID will be finally done with all the COVID guys who are still lingering around. So I see kind of a light at the end of the tunnel, but right now it's just.
Oh, don't worry. NBA guys are watching now. No, I'm serious.
Yeah,
they're looking at guys like AJ Storr and saying, what are his priorities? Does he love basketball? Or does he just love the lifestyle that basketball gives him? Any
On
thoughts?
a lighter note,
go ahead.
I'm excited for Robbie Avila to get a tan because he's definitely going somewhere nice.
Did he commit? Did he commit? Oh,
I assume Musselman will give him a call. I hear LA is nice this time of year.
He's probably already shirtless, waving it around.
Well, I thought he would follow his. I actually thought all five of those guys.
I did too.
All five starters went into the portal. I thought all five would follow their coach, keep it together. I mean,
the Indiana State guys and the FAU guys. I'm surprised because there's Martin, Vlad, and John L are still in too. Those are the two teams.
Basically, five from each school. Basically the starting five from each school has jumped into the portal. All right, so now we'll move on to who's already committed. And this list, not big, not huge names so far. I mean, there are some big names, but the shoe really hasn't fallen yet, or the other shoe. We have number one biggest move I have is Keelan Boswell going to Illinois. Illinois gets a point guard. Kobe Johnson going from USC to UCLA. That's kind of funny. Zamir Ivicic following Calipari to Arkansas. Aaron Bradshaw went to Ohio State, so he didn't follow Calipari. Tremont Mark is going to Texas. There's another guy, another new transfer to Texas. Tucker DeVries, we mentioned, going to West Virginia. Riley Kugel, coming off a very disappointing year, goes to Kansas. Miles Rice, outstanding freshman for Washington State, goes to Indiana. Indiana finally gets a point guard. They've been missing one for a number of years. Frankie Collins, Arizona State, goes to TCU. And Darlinston Dubar, one of my favorite mid-major players, goes to Tennessee. I have Hoster. I still have him at Hoster here. Trust me, he committed to Tennessee today. And I think what they're hoping is the Lightning will strike twice where they got connect. Dubar is very well established. If you watch the Duke game this year, when Hofstra played Duke, he was the one guy that kept them in the game. He was also the player I thought should have won Conference of the Year in the Coastal Athletic Association. It went to his teammate. So Dubar is a sleeper to be an all-conference selection in the SEC next year. Any thoughts about these guys who are switching teams? Cam, I'm going to let you start.
Oh, I noticed there's like a trend of Tennessee players that couldn't stick with Rick Barnes going to North Carolina State. Just DJ Burns, now Brandon Huntley Hatfield. Who knows? Maybe in a year or two he's gonna be in the Final Four.
I think, Kevin Keats is another I thought was a dark horse for that Kentucky job, by the way. But yeah, any thoughts here, Drew? We have your guy, Michael Ajayi. He's number 11 on our list going to Gonzaga.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm speaking to that, I think that's a great pickup. You need an Anton Watson replacement. Ajayi is probably a little bit more offensively charged.
Yes.
And a better, probably like a kind of explosive athlete. Watson is probably the better glue guy. So super excited to kind of have that role kind of already filled in. I know Ajayi is going to be, entered his name into the draft. It's more of a testing the water situation. He's definitely not NBA ready, but he has a shot. I think if he has a really good productive year. I actually like a lot of the guys that have jumped just in terms of as individual players. I think kind of if you look like Boswell, Kobe Johnson, guys who, in my opinion, underperformed this year, for the most part. Then you have the two bigs from Kentucky that go 3 and 4. That'd be interesting to see how they kind of shake out, maybe given a bigger role. I mean, I know one's how do you always pronounce Big Z's last name?
Ivisich.
We'll see if he kind of gets to take the reins there. Now that he's coming back.
Yeah.
Just it sucks because like the Trayvon Mark news, I don't know. Texas losing guys, like I just think like, damn, you get Trayvon Mark, Mitchell comes back, that team's got a real shot to maybe make some noise. That thing's getting kind of blown up as we go.
Yeah, so they added, I think Mark also committed to Texas today. So that's 3 guys Texas had committed, and as soon as they committed, Mitchell and Hunter put their name in the board.
Yeah. So I think there's really good. Like, I think a lot of these. I don't think anybody yet, and I think you're kind of right. Is like the game changer. Is like the piece, the guy that's gonna like that. I'm like, oh, that team is now a favorite or whatever. But some good names, and there's obviously a lot of talent still left to be had.
Watch Ohio State play Aaron Bradshaw at the 4 because they already have a nice rim protector, a nice 5. So I think they're planning on trying Aaron Bradshaw at the 4. Should be interesting. Certainly would help if he could pull it off, will certainly help his NBA stock. Zed Key, by the way, committed to Dayton today. So that's kind of interesting. But Deron Holmes has played alongside another big. Deron Holmes has yet to put his name in the draft. So I don't know what he's thinking there. We shall see. Speaking of the draft, early entrants have till the end of the month. They basically the 27th, so they don't have much time. I don't think there's too many surprises in here. Now, some of these guys, not quite sure whether they're testing the waters or not coming back. Usually the guys who are considered, first-round picks are probably in for good, and that makes sense. I have stars by the guys' names who I know have said they're not coming back. But a guy like Jacoby Walter, who just declared today, I didn't hear whether he's coming back or not, but he's already projected to be a lottery pick. I can't see that he would be coming back. So the top guys that we have in terms of early entrants are Alex Sarr, who of course played in Australia for Perth this year. The aforementioned Walter, Nikola Topic, played in the Adriatic League this year. Isaiah Collier from USC, Rod Dillingham from Kentucky, Matas Buzelis, who played for the disastrous and now defunct G League Ignite team. Goodbye, good riddance. Khalil Ware of Indiana, a little surprised that he has said he won't. He's definitely not coming back. I think he's definitely a first rounder, but I think he could even go higher if he stuck around. Donovan Clingan of Connecticut, who people are now saying can be a number 1 overall pick. I don't see that. I love Clingan, but I don't see an NBA team taking him with a first overall pick. Yves Missi of Baylor said he's not coming back to Baylor. A little bit surprised there. And number 10 on our list is Devin Carter, but we also have the Duke guys, Jared McCain, Filipowski. So, Cam, what do you think about this list? Anybody on here surprise you? You're saying, I mean, obviously, if a guy's testing the waters, he has nothing to lose. So not worth criticizing him for that. But the guys who saying they're not coming back, anybody on here, you're like, what the hell are you thinking?
No, I think for the most part, all the guys that we have starred are more or less ready to make the leap. Or at least, they don't have an option, they're seniors. So I'm not shocked by any of the names on the list.
These guys all have the option to come back.
Yeah, I was saying like our list in general of entrants at this point, but no, I mean, I can't really think of anybody that's shocking to me. A guy that I think probably could have used maybe another year to improve his stock would be Justin Edwards. I feel like had really high hopes for him at the start of the year. And it was a weird season at Kentucky, kind of got outshone by, guys that were much lower on the recruiting list than him.
Yep.
At his position. So that was a guy that I thought
went on, he started to show.
Yeah, he started to turn on later in the year, but I just think, that's a guy that, granted next year's draft is supposed to be much better.
Mm-hmm.
But he could not easily, but he could find himself in the lottery if he had another year of, playing to his record. But no, I mean, outside of that, there's no, I mean, Bronny James shouldn't even be trying at this point, but who needs to mention Bronny James? So,
yeah. What do you think about all this talk? Admittedly, it's all coming from ESPN, from what I can see, but all this talk of Klingon being a possible number 1 overall pick.
It just gives shades of Andrew Bogut, number 1 overall.
Bingo.
It's just
that's a great comp, Cam.
When nobody's like when there's just not that one guy that everybody's like, yeah, this guy's number 1. I'll just take the big guy that can move and play defense. I mean, I love Klingon. Like, I could see him being worth it at 1. Just because I think, what he can do defensively is really valuable. But, there's guys that, you could argue are even higher ceiling defensively that aren't even necessarily playing in the league right now. I mean, too, he's a 25 minutes, 30 minutes a game guy. I just can't imagine spending the number 1 pick on, somebody that's not playing those major minutes. So I don't know. We'll see.
Right.
I think there's. Go ahead, Rich.
Go ahead, Drew.
I think the one thing that's just funny. I agree with Cam on Klingon. It's like I love him, but this goes to my greater point. In the top 10 here, we have 4 centers. And we talk about how like the NBA is, the kind of like the de-evolution and then kind of are they coming back with like the yogi? It's just interesting because it's like I think of Donovan Klingon, and not that it's a 1-to-1 comp, but like what if Walker Kessler was in this class? Big center, defends the rim well, can rebound, isn't an elite shooter by any stretch, but maybe there's a chance maybe his jump shot isn't awful.
That's great though. I mean, I think I feel about the same way about Klingon that I did about Kessler.
Yeah, no, that's what I would go to, and it's like I would have never drafted Kessler number 1 overall. Now, granted, that different draft, obviously there was more talent there, but still, 1.
And even like that was actually who I was thinking about. Yeah, when I mentioned that, is like Kessler's a really high level defender, and he's not even starting for the Jazz.
Yeah,
right.
So I don't know. I have a soft spot for centers. I love the big man game. I want to see more of that in the NBA. I think it's important to the game.
For sure.
But it'd be different if like Klingon flashed like shooting potential or playmaking. It's like, no, he's pretty much just a rim running center that's really good on the defensive end.
Yeah.
That's nice to have, but is that the number 1 pick?
Right.
It's a debate.
Exactly.
Totally
right now we have him like on the edge of the lottery. And I don't think I'm going to be moving him much. And that's exactly where I had Kessler in his draft.
That's where he should go. He's like specialist, it sounds weird saying, because like every team could use a rebounder, a rim protector. Everyone can use that, but like you in today's NBA, you're kind of a specialist if that's what you do. Like Cam said, you're not even a guaranteed starter in today's NBA. Even if you're a great rebounder and a great shot blocker, like you're not even a guaranteed starter. And so, like if Klingon was a better shooter, I could probably buy into it. Or had maybe like the passing upside of like an Andre Jackson from UConn who couldn't shoot but could kind of play in that hybrid post position. But it's like he's a big guy, moves pretty well, but
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
how valuable is that if the other team center is sitting 30 feet away from the basket,
Right.
popping threes the whole time?
Exactly. The one guy on this list that's really surprised me that's saying he's staying in is Norchad Omir, because I don't see Norchad Omir getting drafted. I'm not saying he can't make it. I think he's more athletic than we thought, 2 years ago. And I think he has more potential to be just more than just a post scorer. And I think he has more of an ability to maybe play all the both front court positions and maybe even small forward. But yeah, he's going to have to show that, in the combines or whatever, I think in order to get a chance to be a second round pick. I just wonder what's going on with Miami, because I think he's the only guy. Everybody could really run it back with Miami after this disastrous season, and I think he's the only one that's actually leaving. So I don't know. Miami was such a mystery this year. Certainly Omir would get picked up immediately if you put his name in the portal. The only thing I could, I'm thinking he's thinking, you know what, if I'm in the portal, the only thing they're going to do is put me in the post, and I'm going to be doing the same damn old thing all the time. And so maybe he thinks the only way he gets to show the rest of his game is by going pro. Any thoughts?
I agree. I think that Miami team could kind of have a chance at redemption if he came back, but I mean, if he's got his mind made up, more power to him.
Yeah.
I love North Mirror. I love Miami. They're one of my favorite teams.
Right.
Ever since I've been on the show.
Who did leave in mass was not the starters, but all the backups who didn't get many minutes. So they've had a lot of, like 3-star, 4-star guys, especially 4-star guys that were sitting on the bench, not getting playing time. They are all leaving. I mean, I think there's like 5 of them that are leaving Miami, but Amir was the only starter to leave. But all right, so we'll close the college notebook and move on to our other topic of the day, and that's our season end awards, which was voted for this year by 7 of us, including everyone here today on the show. I'm going to read off our All-Americans and see what you guys have to say here. Our first team All-Americans were Zach Edey, Dalton Connect, Jamal Shed, Tristan Newton, Donovan Klingon, and Edey and Connect were the only 2 to be unanimous. Our second team was Jaden Ledee of San Diego State, Baylor Shireman of Creighton, Terrence Shannon of Illinois, Mark Sears of Alabama, Janiah Broom of Auburn. And lastly, our third team was Deron Holmes, Kyle Filipowski, Caleb Love, Tyler Kolick, and Cam Spencer. So what'd you guys think of the final results? I'll start with you, Cam.
Yeah, I think we did a really nice job. I was a little bit surprised with Edey and Connect being the only unanimous picks. Just knowing our collective love for Jamal Shed, I thought he would have gotten that extra vote. And Klingon too. I think Klingon is kind of like the defining force of this UConn team, as deep as they are. He's just such a big part of how they're able to be as dominant as they have been. But no, I think all around we made some great picks here. I am a little curious, Rich. I saw that RJ Davis also received 2 votes. So I'm curious what the tiebreaker is there.
I broke the tiebreakers, and basically I looked at two numbers. And if there were there's a number on Real GM called FIC, which is kind of like the best way to explain it would be it's kind of like a fantasy points number. But it basically takes into all accounts of all statistics and it subtracts for things like turnovers and gives you points for things like rebounds and steals and so forth. And I also looked at their per. and Cam Spencer had a better FIC and a better per. I was surprised, actually. But you know what it is? Spencer's a really good rebounder. So that's where I think he crushed Davis in that category. So that's how he got the nod. Good question.
Love it.
I voted, I may have been the one who left Klingon off. I voted for Enrique Freeman of Akron. Nobody else did. I just thought that Freeman had a tremendous year. And the reason why, I don't remember if I voted for Klingon or not. I'd have to go back and look. But if I didn't, I was thinking, this guy didn't really play, he really only played like 2/3 of the season. So where Freeman, obviously the competition wasn't the same, but he did so tremendous for Akron. Yeah, and I think he's a dark horse to maybe get drafted this year. We'll see how he does in the combines. They're coming up, by the way. Portsmouth is 2 weeks away, and then the G League Ignite camp, and right after that, NBA Combine. All right, so Player of the Year voting. This we did a little differently. We got 3 votes. Each of us got 3 of the 7 got 3 votes. So you got to give 3 points to your first pick, 2 points to your second pick, and 1 point to your third pick. Nobody was a unanimous selection. So Edie, the most points you could have got was 21. Edie won the award with 19. Connect was second with 10. Shed was third with 5. Drew, any complaints here?
No, I think that was actually the exact order I voted in. If I'm being honest, again, you can call me the known Edie hater if you want to go that extreme, but I'm also not blind and I'm not stupid, so I can't ignore the production that he had. Dalton was a great story, super productive, and in my opinion, in their game where they matched up, was the best player. Given that the difficulty in which he had to undertake in terms of his teammates didn't really come along for the ride, and just obviously the types of shots he had to make versus the shots Edie had to make. So Dalton was number 2. And like Cam said, I love Jamal Shed. We all love Jamal Shed. Heart and soul of a team that if they were healthy would have had a very good chance at making a very, very good run. And I believe if he plays, beats Duke. So that was my 3.
I totally agree. Yeah. They lose to Duke. Houston beats Duke if Shed finishes that game.
And then I looked down the rest of the list. No major complaints. I personally wouldn't have Klingon on there. Again, I think he's more of a really important piece to the machine, but again, more of a specialist. I think Newton is the UConn guy.
He missed a lot of games.
He missed a lot of time, and I'm always a believer of if you have one guy on. And I know I'm not saying the same person voted for this. It's just they're on there, so 2 people thought a UConn guy was deserving. I just am a believer in college in particular. It's hard to be the guy, the player of the year if you have another player of the year on your team. Especially at this level, it's a little bit different. But I don't have any major complaints. I think I look at all these guys, and it's pretty clear that all these guys were very, very deserving. And again, I'm kind of nitpicking Klingon. I mean, you can probably name at most 2 or 3 centers that were better than him this year if you really try. So no major complaints.
I personally voted for Edie number 1, Terrence Shannon number 2. And you might say, how do you give it to Shannon over Dalton Connect? Well, because he plays defense. That's why I would give it to Shannon over Connect. And then for third place was tough. I thought of Connect, I thought of Shed, and I voted for Alabama fans. I voted for Mark Sears. What do you think, Cam, how the Player of the Year voting came out?
First off, Rich, the Bama fans will never forgive you, so stop trying. I mean, personally, I voted for Edie, Connect, and Shed in that order. Almost certainly. I think those are clearly the 3 best players in college basketball this year, and most important to their teams in various levels. I'm both a Zach Edey hater and a Zach Edey apologist at the same time. I just think he had one of the more impressive March Madness runs I have seen in a long time. Just on a sheer production basis. I mean, it's frankly, he's carrying that Purdue team to the finals. I just think, say what you will about his NBA prospects, he was the best player in college basketball this year, the most dominant force.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, historic.
Yeah.
type of production. So then we move on to freshman of the year, and this was a really interesting vote. And we had a lot of different opinions and a lot of different votes. It was close. Reed Shepherd won with 12 votes. Jared McCain was second with 8. Right behind him was Jacoby Walter with 7. And right behind him was Stefan Castle with 6. And then Dillingham had 4. So what do you think of these results?
I kept scrolling for the none of the above button, and it wasn't there. I just
Yeah, it was.
like I don't
Yes, it was.
just none. Maybe not above, just none. Like I just wanted to skip this award this year because honestly, this class of freshmen was so weak for me. I couldn't get behind anybody. I couldn't even tell you who I voted for. I might have been Jacoby Walter just because I think he's maybe the best out of everybody. I don't know. I just this is such a mess of a class, and there's so many guys all over the place in terms of like their level of play throughout the season. Like
Yes.
I didn't know who to pick, and clearly nobody else did either. So I'm glad I'm not alone.
What do you think, Drew?
I mean, I can tell you I picked. I do think this list is interesting because I think for what we do at the show, it's always kind of hard to separate like NBA like prospects and like college production. Like
exactly.
So like for me, while I do agree with Cam on pretty much every guy in this list, the one guy outside of unfortunately his one March Madness appearance, I thought Reed Shepherd was, but out of all these guys by far and away, pretty consistently productive all year long across the board. He was the easy pick for me. Again, we can have the conversation on the NBA side. It's weird because normally when we talk about top freshmen, we're like, the top freshman is also going to be like the number 1, 2, or 3 pick in the draft. So we feel pretty good where it's like none of these guys are going to be the number 1 pick. I'd be shocked. Like I'd be like blown away. I don't think any of these guys are number 1 pick personally.
I probably agree. Yeah, I would have to agree. Yeah.
Just because none of them, like Cam said, none of them stand out. Like they all are similar enough. They're all kind of wing guards for the most part. Like some of these guys aren't even NBA ready as we talk. But I went Reed Shepherd 1. I believe my number 2 was Castle. And again, part of that was maybe being a little bit more thinking in the terms of like for a freshman to go join that type of program with that type of expectations to play big minutes. And while he didn't statistically pop every night, he did have big games. He had a couple of big games in the tournament when he had, was it 21? Was that in the Elite Eight?
Championship,
I believe.
Wasn't it the championship?
No, it wasn't the championship. Might have been, he had a big game in the Elite Eight or Final
Maybe it
Four.
was in the maybe it was against Bama.
Yeah. So I thought for what he did to step into that role did impress me in terms of the maturity, and he still played, pretty well. And then I think I went Rob Dillingham 3rd. That one was the 3rd was where I was like completely. I honestly it was almost like a throwaway. Rob was more just the times I saw him play. There were games where I saw him do stuff that I'm like, yeah, that translates to the NBA. Like that's an NBA skill set. That's an NBA move. That's NBA shot making. Whatever it was.
By the way, ESPN says he's in the running to be the first overall pick. Of course, they're casting a wide net. The last time I heard, who the heck did was it Woj?
Kevin O'Connor has Castle
the ringer.
1.
Right.
Yeah.
So
it's going to be all over the place.
Yeah. So like when I say I'd be shocked, it's just I'm not confident in any of these. I would put no money. I would bet nothing on any of these guys being number 1. I'd still go with Sarr, and I haven't even really seen him play at all, but just off the physical traits. But I think those are the 3. But I believe Shepherd was the only guy that I was pretty confident in saying like he deserved my first place vote for what he did in college. I liked Castle. Just again, kind of even almost away from the basketball. And then after that, it was a crapshoot. I'm glad Jackson Shelstad got on there. I thought he was super underrated at Oregon, so I was really glad to see him. But you could have made a case for, the kid from Colorado. I'm drawing a blank on his name. Could have been on this list if he didn't miss time.
Cody Williams.
Cody Williams could have been on here. So there were a lot of guys, but outside of the 1, 2, I was pretty open to anybody taking this one.
Yeah, I had no trouble picking Shepherd number 1. And then it got interesting. I had to think about it. I don't even remember who I voted for 2nd, 3rd. I think I went Walter. I think I went Walter and then McCain. I think that's how I went. So very close to how we actually ended up. All right. So lastly, Coach of the Year, and this obviously was influenced by what happened in March Madness. We voted after March Madness. We do that every year because we could. Here at the show, we consider that to be part of the season. But Kelvin Sampson won most of the awards in this category. However, in our Coach of the Year voting, Danny Hurley crushed him with 18 votes. Sampson had 8, and then there was a tie for third between Nate Oates and Will Wade with 3 apiece. Surprisingly, and I think Cam might agree with me here, Lamont Paris of South Carolina didn't get a hell of a lot of love. He got 2 votes with a bunch of other people. So, Cam, what'd you think of our Coach of the Year voting? March Madness influence for sure, no?
Honestly, I would have voted Dan Hurley before March Madness.
Ah.
I think the only thing that, voting before, if anything, voting before March Madness would have hurt my odds of voting for him. Just in that, they could have gone out and had, a meltdown in March Madness, and obviously that didn't happen.
Mhm.
But I just think this UConn team, like, a major part of why they're so dominant is that they're incredibly well coached. There's a lot of mouths to feed on that team, and that requires a really like light touch in terms of like locker room management, but also like how you design an offense for that sort of team. I mean, Klingon alone, how do you design a defense that functions with Klingon on the court and off the court? Incorporating freshmen, incorporating players that haven't had a ton of experience, like, and still continuing like this high caliber of play. I just thought he was the easiest first pick. I went Kelvin Sampson second on my voting. I just, granted, he won a lot of awards this year. He's a completely deserving coach.
Sure.
Great team as well. And yeah, I actually went Lamont Paris third. So
I think I did too. I think I voted exactly the same as you then.
Yeah. I just think the coaching job, it takes a lot to change a culture. And on top of changing that culture, also have a pretty dang successful season. And to do that with pretty limited talent at South Carolina this year. Granted, he did come in with some guys last season, but that's just I haven't seen a night and day transition season to season like that in college basketball in quite a while, and I think Lamont Paris deserved a little love for the season that South Carolina had.
Right. Danny Sprinkle too. I'm surprised he only got 1 vote. I thought he would get a little more love. What do you think, Drew?
Yeah, I 100% agree with Cam. Hurley was a very easy choice. I would have voted for him before. I think before March Madness, I think if anything, that just made it kind of a no-brainer. You don't, in this sport, lose what he lost and come back and be better. It just doesn't happen.
Right.
I don't know if I'll see a team I can say
unprecedented.
Oh yeah. I mean, Sonogo, Hawkins, Jackson, Calcaterra, all gone. Cam Spencer's new. Castle's a freshman. Klingon was a piece last year. Can he be the guy now?
Yeah, what did he play like maybe 12 minutes a game?
Yeah, he was playing 12 to 15 minutes a night and was a kind of a super specialist. We need a big body kind of role. So unprecedented. Sampson was my number 2 as well. Kind of a similar vibe. He picked up more and more steam as the year went on. Like, I don't think anyone was shocked, throughout probably the first 2/3 of the season that Houston was good. We all projected them to be a top 5 team in the country. They were, but it was, as we talked about a lot, the injuries. And I just believe, when we talk about what has happened at South Carolina, it's like people forget that like Kelvin Sampson has kind of, it's a redemption project at Houston. He went there, has turned that program around. And if you want to talk about the strongest cultures in college basketball right now, you'd be hard pressed to probably pick 2 outside of UConn and Houston. What he's done. Did they play the prettiest brand of basketball? No. But in today's era, and this makes me sound like an old man, but you have the social media and so many people want to be recruited just so they can put out their tweet of, blessed to receive an offer. For him to find guys constantly who want to put in the work, have guys like a Jamal Shed be one of the best players in the country, speaks his volumes. I mean, those guys put their bodies on the line. They buy in. The whole team outside of Shed's coming back. Like, what does that tell you? Like, guys, yes, they weren't all super high, NBA product, but they don't have guys jumping in the portal and just abandoning ship. They're all coming back. And Shed's leaving for an NBA shot. It's not like he's jumping ship somewhere. So that speaks volumes. Shameless plug here. I did vote for Mark Few. I know that for a lot of the season, it was Gonzaga doom and gloom all year. almost similar to a situation of Dan Hurley, not to the extreme, but I think people kind of forget what he lost coming in. You lose a Drew Timme, you lose a Strother, you lose a Hunter Salas and an Efton Reed to the portal. Steele Venters blows his ACL before he even plays. You lose Malachi and you lose Rasir Bolton. I mean, he basically lost his whole team outside of Anton Watson and Ben Gregg, really, and puts it together. It gets to his 9th straight Sweet 16, bringing in transfers, playing freshmen. I just think he did have a great year. It is tough when you're on the West Coast. I know a lot of people don't watch. Part of it was just kind of a middle finger to all the doom and gloom. I know when you're on the show, we weren't really that negative because we actually watch the games and we don't just look at box scores here. And then if I had to say my next coach would have been Sprinkle if I had a fourth. I had to write few in, I believe. Sprinkle was my next choice on the drop down box. Because again, I just am a big believer in this sport with so much movement and mobility available to basically lose guys, like massive amounts of guys, which is kind of the common theme for all 4 of the coaches that I would have picked for this. They still found a way to succeed, get to March because your playoff matters, and be successful in their conference tournament and have some varying degree of success in March. So those would have been my 3 that I voted, and Sprinkle would have been kind of my honorable mention.
All righty. All right. So that wraps up the show. We don't have a mailbag this week. Oh, we have one more thing before we go. One more thing. Our picks of the week has concluded. So if you remember, Drew won our conference tourney predictions. He also, we didn't get to do our picks for the Final Four, but we did them all the way up to the Sweet 16 we did them all the way up to the Elite. No, we did them all the way up to the Final Four. And so are you ready for this, Drew? You won the overall season projections by a 10th of a point. A 10th of a point at 58.1%. Now, Cam would have beaten you had he qualified, but Cam only had 37 games. You know what the cutoff was? You had to have 38 games, Cam.
Hey,
it's written in our bylaws.
Shooter.
Huh?
I'm a low volume shooter, Rich. I'm still hitting 59.5%.
Cam's that elite catch and shoot guy you just terrified of when the game's on the line. Shot clock's winding down and you see Cam in the corner and you're shit in the bed.
Call me Golke.
So also we before the tournament started, we had our little contest where we picked the Final Four, we picked a couple of sleepers, and our guest Josh Simon actually won that because he was the only one of us to actually get 2 teams in the Final Four. He had UConn as his winner, Purdue as his runner-up. So he beat me. I was second, and Caleb was actually third. Josh, you win our traditional whoever wins the bracket contest gets our traditional award, which is one of Mookie's old socks. And then finally in our bracket pool, where we all actually compete for money. By the way, would you please pay me? My wife won that contest with her bracket pool, and had Purdue won the championship, my mom would have won the pool, and my mom she's never won anything come close to winning the pool. But if had Purdue won, she would have won it. But my wife won it, and her a friend of ours of the family used to be my wife's boss, was second, and a friend of mine from here in Jersey finished third. So we basically stunk. Everybody but us won anything it had to do with the bracket. So there is no mailbag because the only thing I could have included was people from Alabama saying, "You suck." So that was basically our mailbag. It has been our mailbag for like the last 4 weeks. So as always, I want to thank all of our listeners. I want to thank Drew and Cam for showing up. And if you ever miss an episode, you can get caught up at hoopsprospects.com. Also, if you'd like to send us a question, not just telling me I suck, please email it to admin@hoopsprospects.com. We also take questions via social media on Twitter @hoopsprospects, on Instagram @thehoopsprospects, and on Facebook @hoopspros. We will be back later this week with our NBA playoff special, which we're going to be doing recording on Thursday and then posting on Friday evening, or not Friday evening, Friday morning. And we'll talk all about the NBA playoffs. We haven't talked about the NBA for quite some time, but that's going to be our focus probably for at least a month. And we'll be talking a lot of NBA over the next 4 to 6 weeks. I will probably miss a couple of those weeks because I need surgery on my spine. Looking forward to that, gentlemen. Any final thoughts?
We'll get you a get well soon card from the Bama fans.
What about one of Mookie's old socks?
Nah.
Mookie has a reputation. If you want to know what I'm talking about, he has a reputation for stealing socks. He just loves socks. He just you put 2 socks down, you put one on, and you go to put the other one on, and it's gone. Mookie's run away with it. So yeah. So I basically what I do is, you know how your socks get stretched out eventually and you throw them away? Well, with Mookie, I tie him up in a knot and I give him a sock, and he loves it. So, all right. So, any more final thoughts before we go?
Already looking forward to March of 2025. Can't wait. Already checking down the calendar.
Me too. I wish I could wave a magic wand and just skip over the next month or so. I've never had major surgery ever.
Yeah.
I've never spent a night in a hospital ever. I'm not looking forward to this whatsoever. All right, folks. We'll see you soon.